Our next presentation will be by Michelle Moujaes and Katrina Bitar. Michelle is the founder and executive director of Faith Tree Resources. After graduating from Boston University with a degree in social work and community organizing, she began working for a variety of agencies, including the Michael J. Fox Foundation for Parkinson's Research, Monster.com's Making It Count program, the Massachusetts Coalition for the Homeless, and the Easter Seals School for Children with Autism. She also has leadership experience from a number of roles within the Orthodox Christian Church, including as the New England Regional Youth Director for the Antiochian Orthodox Christian Archdiocese of North America, the Metropolitan Committee Chair in Los Angeles for International Orthodox Christian Charities, a member of the Orthodox Christian Fellowship's National Board of Directors, founding chair of St. Elijah Orthodox Church Elementary School, programming in Oklahoma City, among others. She will be joined today by Katrina Bitar, who is the Director of Youth Equipped to Serve, otherwise known as YES, a program of Focus North America. She also directs Camp St. Nicholas in Fraser Park, California, part of the Southern California Deanery. She is a graduate of Rutgers University and St. Vladimir's Orthodox Theological Seminary. She has been involved in youth and young adult ministry for nearly 20 years. Please welcome Michelle and Katrina.
Thank you. Well, good morning, and thank you. I cannot imagine a place I'd rather be than right here with all of you and those of you online. It is a blessing and an honor to be amongst such speakers and people in this room, and I have to give a shout out to Holly, who has just done a phenomenal job organizing and executing what I know is so much work. So we're grateful to be a part of it, Holly, definitely. And Katrina and I actually were just chatting. It's phenomenal to see how God provides, and each of the speakers, which were so beautifully giving us so much rich content and things to ponder, really it seems like it's building on each other. So it's really fun to see that all come together. I want to know how many people watched the Olympics this year. Did any of you watch the Olympics? Nice. Okay, we did it, Father, kind of the same. Our family didn't really watch, but I'll tell you what we did watch. We watched U.S. women's track and field, and here's why. There actually was a hometown hero from our neighborhood in Valencia, California, who won her 11th medal in the Olympics. Can you imagine that? 11. This year, she actually became the most decorated U.S. Olympic track and field star, even surpassing Carl Lewis. Her name is Allison Felix. Did any of you hear about her? Allison Felix, a tremendous athlete. But what you might not have heard about her is that her career almost took a really big hit in 2016. Here's what happened. So it was at the Olympics in Rio de Janeiro, and her teammates were in the middle of the qualifying round that they had to do right before the actual Olympics took place, and they were in the 4x100 relay. So Allison was literally milliseconds away from handing off the baton to the next runner when an athlete from Brazil in the lane next to her just tripped a little bit, nudged her with her elbow, and Allison dropped the baton. And immediately, the U.S. was disqualified. If you watch the videos, it's actually really tragic. I mean, the whole team just stopped and stood in the middle of this track going, what just happened? Now, the good news is the story doesn't actually end there. So if you keep watching the videos of the race, here's what happens next, and it's fascinating. In a heartbeat, Allison begins looking for her coaching team, and she sees that they're way across the field on the other side of the track. So she quickly moves into kind of a triage mode, and she begins yelling directions at her teammates. Pick up the baton, go to the exchange zone, bring it back to me, I'm gonna go petition the petition station and the judges. So everybody just very quickly started responding to her directions. And even though the team came in dead last, what Allison did that day actually saved them from being disqualified. And here's why. Allison knew all the details and all the rules surrounding the baton handoff, which was a really good thing because she also knew her coaches, who typically would have dealt with it, were really far away. So she did it. She appealed, she got her team a do-over, and they actually went on to win the gold that year. Now our hometown girl is a very decorated track star hero, and the U.S. went on to take the gold. So after that race, in an interview, Allison was asked by a reporter how she knew so quickly what to do when, as I said, the coaching staff typically would have taken care of that. And this is the part that I want you to hear. She told him that the U.S. Olympic team spends an extraordinary amount of time coaching the team on the details of the baton pass. She said to them, it's as important as form or stretching or nutrition or any other aspect of running. Which is why, and you may not know this, I didn't know this, there's actually a whole field of study on the baton handoff. Like, people actually get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars every year teaching people to hand a stick from one guy to another. But if you look at Alice and Felix, I mean, it's pretty important, and you can guess why. Because if you get it right, you win. But if you get it wrong, a lot of your work, if not all your work, can dissipate in a hot second. You know, I liken good mentoring to the baton handoff. It's just a vital part of our race, especially when we're in ministry, especially as maturing Christians. The handing off from one to another. And if the Alice and Felix story shows us anything, it's that it takes great intentionality and thoughtful planning if we want to do it well. And that means it requires study and practice and wisdom and certainly prayer. And this is especially true in the church. If we want to hand down the faith, as Paul told us in Titus, just as it was handed to you, then we've got to be thoughtful about how we do that. And so today, that's what Katrina and I are going to talk about. We've been asked to talk about how we bridge the mentoring gap and what it means to be in real relationship with those people that we mentor. So let's talk for a second about the state of mentorship in the U.S., particularly in the church. Informal survey and plenty of anecdote tell us, I mean, we've even heard some of it here this morning, that in the church in this country, we don't spend a lot of time learning about how to execute a great handoff or a great mentoring relationship, or how do we pour into the emerging leaders that are coming after us. And y'all please hear me say this, I want this to be heard really loud and clear, while there are tons of great advisors and mentors and folks who pour into the next generation with love and with care, as far as it being a formal study and executing intentionally and all that actually goes from handing off from one generation to the next, I'd like to assert that we can do more. And I would also like to assert that it's incumbent upon, as Steve said, the adults in the room, to really explore what a methodical and intentional and strategic baton handoff might look like. So that's what we're going to talk about. So first, what is mentoring? Does anyone want to tell me? Anybody have a shot? What is mentoring? Oh, come on, someone can give me something. I will call on you guys. Nobody? Okay, I'll put forth a definition. I'll let you off lightly. For our purposes today, it's not complicated. Just so that we're all talking about the same thing, I'm going to give you a definition taken from Reggie Campbell's book, Mentor Like Jesus. And the definition that we will use for today is intentionally investing in the next generation for God's glory. Let me say that one more time. Mentoring is intentionally investing in the next generation for God's glory. Mentoring isn't about coming to know something. That's education. Mentoring also isn't about learning to do something. That's training. And mentoring surely isn't about handing over our ministry efforts or our best ideas to another person and then telling them how to continue our vision, because that at best is employment. Mentoring is about showing someone how to be something. And for our purposes, it's about becoming a learner and a follower of Jesus Christ. Now, many of us, and I think Katrina can speak for you, and I know for me, we really do consider ourselves as mentors to some of the relationships and folks in our lives, right? I would assume that most of you do here. So whether it's to our children or our grandchildren or a parishioner, or maybe it's a Sunday school student that you teach or someone who you're co-laboring with in ministry. Or maybe for some of you, you actually would consider yourselves mentors to those in authority, like clergy or hierarchs. all of those are important, but the question that sometimes lacks is, are we intentional about how we do that? Do we execute such mentoring opportunities with a plan and a timeline and maybe even measurable touch points? So I'm going to ask you by a show of hands, I won't make you actually give an answer, but by a show of hands, how many of you here would consider yourselves intentional in the way that you pass the faith baton? Excellent, 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 excellent. I love that. And just to be clear, if you haven't thought about it, there is no judgment. So let me just say that I am in full-time vocational ministry, and I work alongside some of the greatest emerging leaders that I've ever met. And I can promise you that I'm not nearly as intentional as I wish I could be. So I first of all applaud you and say, okay, well then let's figure it out. Let's talk about it together. So any of you who raised your plan, can you share something about a specific approach or process that you might take as you're engaging emerging leaders? Yes?
Being deliberate in the explanation of why things are done in a particular way.
Being deliberate about the why things are done in a particular way. Excellent. Anybody else? Yes?
Finding good fits for them to do actual meaningful work.
Finding good fits for them to do actual meaningful work. Great. Yes?
Additionally, I would say just make a regular time. I don't have to remind myself of that too, that if I don't intentionally do that, it's easy for me to say tomorrow, next week, I'm too busy, blah, blah, blah. But if I don't take that time, not just to convey information, but to show that psychological and spiritual commitment, it's easy for the relationship to drop by the boards.
That's fantastic, Father. Thank you, because I think that leads me into perfectly, if we look at Allison Felix, well, and I don't know if you all could hear what he said, but making time and a committed and consistent time, which we will get in a little bit later in a few minutes. We're going to talk about an actual plan of action, but what you touched on is important, which is making and carving out that time so that it does become a priority, that is thought out and studied. I mean, that's what we learned from Allison Felix. If we want to do it well, we've got to make some consistent effort. So the first thing we're going to do real quick is let's think about who we're actually passing the baton to. And for all of us in this room and everybody online, it will certainly be different. And by definition, although not always, but by definition, we pass the baton to someone who's running a little bit behind us, right? And that's just kind of how the race works. You make your lap and then you hand off to the guy who's ready to make his lap. So again, not always, but we can assume that whoever we are passing the baton to, maybe younger, maybe not, but possibly less experienced in some way, okay? So the first thing we want to explore is how we will experience being in deep relationship with those younger or less experienced people. So if you will look in your workbook, there are 2 questions that we would love for you to ponder. And we will give you, what, Katrina, 3 minutes? Sure. 3 minutes, that sounds good.
Okay. We would really love to hear where you're coming from, your experience. Does anyone want to share some of their answers to the first question? Just a few answers. When have you felt challenged? Sister Ignatia.
Particularly with teenagers being very closed.
Yes.
And you feel like you're just hitting a completely closed door.
Yes. Yes. Does anyone else resonate with that? Yeah. Christina.
Yeah, I heard something similar about when it's clear that they're not ready
Yes.
to be open or vulnerable. But also for myself, if I ever catch myself feeling intimidated by that
Right.
space, then I'm sort of also closed.
Right. Right. Great. This is great. We're going to dig into that a little bit later. So it's important to hear how you all have had your experience. Anyone else, something different?
Just for the sake of people online, if you could repeat what you ran
Sure.
Yes.
if you wouldn't mind coming up to the microphone, that really helps our people online as well.
Wonderful. So what's come up so far is that people have mentioned that they felt challenged when someone is closed off. Like, how do you begin to build a relationship when someone is closed off? And also, how do you not feel intimidated yourself by them not being ready? Anything else? Yes. I'm sorry, say that again. Electronics, yes. Yes, electronics. Right.
From the Zoom, one point was
Yeah.
laying the foundation of just friendship and trust.
A beautiful thing to come up, because that's really important in what we're going to build together. How do you build trust so that the walls come down? How do you build trust so that you're able to engage, right? And this is a process that sometimes we want to rush into. Anything else for that first question? Yes.
Things like cultural differences between age groups.
Cultural difference. Okay. Cultural differences between age groups. Yes. Absolutely. Anything else? Yes.
Language and terminology.
Oh, language and terminology. Yes. What are the words you're saying? And yeah, there's yes. Yes.
Time. It
Time.
takes time to really deeply build relationship and to do it while you need time. You're
Amen.
all short of time.
Amen. Making time, having time, time. Absolutely. Let's jump into the next question. This is really great. What everyone said is going to build on where we're going to go. And we want to go where you want to go too. So that's important to us. Second question. What have you experienced that was effective in building relationships? Yes?
Listening.
Listening. Amen. Yes. Listening is the beginning, I think, for sure. Yes?
Normalizing struggle,
Oh, yes.
like so they know that it's not just them.
Okay, normalizing struggle. Beautiful. Yes.
Zoom participants that actually setting aside that time and having that time for the relationship.
Yes. Yes. Time. Yes.
So I had said that stating expectations clearly and being sort of honest, genuine, and direct. That's really helpful.
Clear expectations, being honest, genuine, direct. Beautiful. Yes. Yes.
This is mostly based in youth ministry context, but knowing names.
Yes. Knowing people's names. Yes, so important. Yes.
Spending time and carefree time with them, maybe attending a sporting event
Yes.
when nobody else shows up, and being lighthearted because all this stuff and God is serious and just cracking jokes all the time.
Yes. Humor is a huge icebreaker with connection, for sure. I can relate to you. Yes, we can connect.
Working on a project together.
Yes, working on a project together. Beautiful. Steve?
Trying not to have an agenda or
Yes.
pressure.
Yes. No agenda, no pressure. Beautiful.
Someone online said asking what their interests are, what they like about themselves and their lives, where's God in their lives, being
Yes.
vulnerable about my own weakness.
Beautiful. Thank you all. Thank you all for sharing. I think what everyone has said has just reminded me how important it is to think so much and take the time to think and pray and reflect before we do, right? Steve mentioned that, right? Before we do, it's important to consider why we're doing anything and what is my motivation in wanting to build this relationship with this young person. And stop and do that. So let's stop for a second and think about motivation. Think about why we do anything. And so when we're examining motivation, it's good to identify if there are any unhealthy motivations, right? Because sometimes it's easy to feel like our intentions are there and we're ready to go and we just go. And if we don't stop to think, like, why am I even going? Why do I care? Why does it matter that this young person is engaged in the body of Christ? Because what do you all think would be the most unhealthy motivation to have that we would need to identify before moving forward? What would be a very unhealthy motivation? Fear, right? Amen. Fear is very separate from why Jesus does anything, okay? Do we just want to invest in young people so they are at church, behaving a certain way? Are we trying to keep them from all the harmful things we can imagine they'll encounter? Do we tell them what to think and do because we're afraid they'll think for themselves? The reality is that they're not at church most of the time. In fact, I would say that we shouldn't want them to be. The Lord calls the body together to be equipped and formed to be sent out. How incredible if this would be the foundation of mentoring. In his book, For the Life of the World, Father Alexander Schmemann says, it is the very communion with the Holy Spirit that enables us to love the world with the love of Christ. The Eucharist is the sacrament of unity and the moment of truth. Here we see the world in Christ as it really is. Embracing this truth that the whole world is deeply loved by the Lord allows us to embrace our love for him by going out to care for the world that he died for. So essentially, instead of doing this with our young people, right, and even starting to preach a theology of fear, right, and trying to keep them like this, what we want to do that allows them to feel and embrace that they are church at all times anywhere is when we empower them and allow them to embrace who they are for the world. Not that they're going into a place they need to be weary of, but they need to be prepared to navigate the world in Christ, right? Which is a motivation of love. Together with our young people, we seek to live into our true selves. Each of us and the young people we are invested in are truly integrated in the body of Christ when we call out who God is designing them to be. When we look, when we notice, right? We don't do this because we're afraid, but we look at them, we see them, like Christina mentioned, giving them meaningful things to do, like Steve mentioned, about doing like these impactful things for the life of the world, right? We want to show them how to be something, as Michelle mentioned, right? Who is God designing them to be? Entering into the Lord's ministry for emerging leaders requires us to trust and value our young people and what they have to offer here and now. We need to stop saying future of the church, right? They are the church. We become full, integrated members in the body, right? As babies for a reason. If we welcome their thoughts and create a space where they can share and process their doubts and struggles, they will be much more equipped to encounter difficult choices and unfamiliar situations. So let's let go of fear as the motivator and embrace the joy of serving from a place of love. We should seek to stand alongside them as they learn to navigate their own life in Christ, not just give them answers and instructions. If we want to share in the Lord's why, then our mentoring needs to be centered on equipping and entrusting them to be who they really are, servants of the world that God loves and true and full members of his body.
All right. All right. So we've talked for just a minute about the need to really study how we're going to approach mentoring with a plan. We've talked about motivation for mentors, sort of the why behind our mentoring efforts. And now we're going to dig in for just a moment into what we'll call the mentor's mindset, okay? I'd like to suggest that mentoring really is a spiritual opportunity like none other. You know, as we grow older and as our kids grow older and as whatever, we progress in our careers or in our ministries, it can be really incredibly tempting to just sit back, enjoy life, and take, better vacations, eat at better restaurants, just do bigger things. But if we're not careful, finishing the race well has the potential to become a little bit selfish. In fact, if we go back to Reggie Campbell, he says it this way. He says, "I don't think God only cares about how you served him when you were young. My Bible doesn't say make disciples until you get a few bucks or until you retire and move to the mountains. It says to make disciples, and I believe that at least a part of the reason that God gives some people more access, more resources, more money, free time, and wisdom is so that they can invest in those coming after them." End quote. And when we hear that, that's what Jesus Christ did, right? But to do that, we have to develop his mind, or a mentor mindset. So let's talk about what makes that up. Essentially, the mindset refers to how we think about mentoring. So the first thing I want you to know is that number one, mentoring is all about relationship, deep relationship, knowing someone and being known. It's about cultivating and growing and engaging in that deep relationship, and then stewarding those relationships well, which we'll talk about in just a moment. That means that in real relationship where you're known and you know the other, it's not going to be neat all the time, or predictable, or non-invasive, right? And in the church, a lot of our relationships can be that way, even if you teach a classroom full of Sunday school students, or if you see people every week or at every event. Sometimes they're a little bit neat, right? We don't always get down and dirty. In a mentoring relationship, it's different. It isn't, a Bible study and a video with discussion questions. It can get messy. The mentor mindset requires you're open to bringing real issues to the table. It requires you to be personal and transparent and exposed. So actually requiring us to do the sharing of our own lives. It also requires us to be in pursuit of a deeper relationship with Jesus Christ ourselves. Those kind of relationships must be stewarded if we're going to do them well. So does anyone know where the word stewardship comes from? Anyone? It's an old English term. Do you know? I saw a hand. So if you'll think back to the days of realms and castles and like Braveheart, essentially people lived in realms that were about the size of like 3 counties today, right? And there in the middle of the realm there was a castle, and it was the Lord's castle, and he owned everything in the realm. He literally owned the land and the farms, and he had the buildings and all the commerce, and everything was under his control and his authority. And of course, his house and castle was like the nicest in all of the realm. But if you look down the road a little bit, there was another house that was like nice, maybe not as nice as his, but that's where the Lord's steward lived. And the steward didn't own anything, none of it was his, but he took care of everything that was the Lord's. He managed the crop rotations, the labor forces, the taxes, like all of it, the banking, the commerce, and any of the Lord's other interests. That's what stewardship was all about. Basically, it was asset management, right? So in the 1600s, when the translators of the King James Version of the Bible needed a word to describe how God wants us to steward, that's what is his. Stewardship was a natural word. That idea just naturally fit with an understanding that all of it is the Lord's and the fullness thereof, as we hear in Psalms. He owns it all. And that includes his children. If we are going to be responsible managers of his stuff for his glory, we really must focus on a mindset that is in service of the other. Another part of the mentor mindset has to do with math, multiplication really. Think about how Jesus Christ poured into his disciples. His mentorship of those 12 men allowed them to create their own groups, later called churches, of mentees, and those groups created other groups, and the result is the greatest movement in the history of all time. From that first mentoring group, millions and millions and millions of us have come to become followers of Jesus Christ. Healthcare, education, social service institutions can trace themselves all the way back to his name and the mentoring group he poured into. So we must understand the math. The idea that pouring deeply into relationship with 1, 2, or a few people at a time actually will allow us to multiply exponentially, right? This is an important part of the mentor mindset. And if you do the math yourself, think about it. If in your lifetime you mentor 10 people, and those 10 people go on to mentor 10 people, and those 10 people go on to mentor 10 people, I mean, that's kingdom building right there. That's us coming before God saying, look at the impact, and using everything we can to try and influence that. And number 3, and somebody said this, and I was happy to hear it, it's sometimes a little bit countercultural, especially these days, but there is a part of the mentor mindset that we really have to remind ourselves, and the world is not set up to help us do it, but it's not about me. It's not about me. Which in My best guess actually looks a lot like listening. So whoever said that, I applaud you. And it can be really hard. I mean, for me as a mom, as an executive director, like I'm always problem solving and I'm always directing. I do it all day long, right? But authentic mentoring and the mindset of an authentic mentor is different. It means allowing someone else to learn from my mistakes so they don't have to pay the price. And it's allowing them to come to realizations on their own without my help, or maybe with my help, but not really as I think it should be, right? It's an opportunity for me to assist another person to, as Katrina said, live out God's design for their life, not mine. Would you all agree with me that living the life that God designed us to live with a purpose, on purpose, is a really good thing? Do we agree with that? Good, then let's have an exercise. I need 2 people. 2 people. Oh, come on, Michael March, help me out. All right. One more. Who else do we have? Come on up here. Okay. So, if you'll just stand around this little table right here, you can have a seat on opposite sides of that table. I'm going to tell you, so I have 4 kiddos, and I'm moving out of the phase now that I have teenagers of what might have been the most personal trauma that I've had in my adult life, and that is Lego. How many people here have kids and deal with Lego? Walking on Lego, watching like your entire inheritance go to Lego as your parents are buying every Christmas gift. In my living room, my dining room, everything was Lego. Well, here's what I'm going to ask these lovely folks to do today. So we opened them for you so we could expedite this. 2 of the exact same sets of Lego. They're quick. We only have, I don't know, 11 pieces in here, I think. Yeah, super easy, okay? So I'm going to ask each of you to take a stab at taking these little Lego boxes. What are they? Super Mario, okay? And you're going to build them. But I'm going to up the ante a little bit, okay? Tell me your name.
Athanasia.
Athanasia. Athanasia, nice to meet you. Michael, nice to see you. You're going to represent this whole half of the room. So really, your job is to encourage her and cheer her on. If you let them down, there's going to be shame. So we just need to know that, okay? Your job is to represent this half of the room, okay? Let's hear it for Michael, you guys. Come on. And I'm going to up the ante. So whoever wins gets this lovely little swag, a Faith Tree hat to take home. So we want to see you guys do it. We want to see you do it fast, okay? There's a lot at stake here, all right? So I'm going to give you just 2 minutes, 11 pieces. You can do it. Cheer your team on, and let's go. Open those boxes and get cracking.
Steven, you work with me.
You're on the wrong side of the boundary.
You shouldn't be.
Whatever you do, don't step on.
No excuses, buddy.
All right, let's see what she's got. All right, Anastasia, you're doing it. I see it. Michael, feeling some pain here.
These pieces.
Isn't it so stressful even putting together 11 like pieces of Lego in front of an audience? All right, she's getting there. You see your thing?
It's this thing will
Here.
not stay on. Thank you.
Here, do you see that? All right.
Anyone want to come help?
All right.
Yeah, this piece is not working.
Help her out. Help her out.
This is not going there. Can I hold this? I don't know where this is supposed to go. Are you sure? Just an extra?
No.
Okay, there's supposed to be 2 of those.
Oh, wait.
There's no frog head.
You have that?
There's no frog head. I put this hat in.
Is there anything else?
Otherwise, I'm finished.
What are all those pieces?
I don't know. They come with extra pieces.
Okay, you have 30 seconds. Yeah, cheer on your teams. Give them some support.
I don't have a Mario. I don't have a frog.
The Mario's not
I don't
included. Is
have
that what it
another
says?
blue
there's no Mars. This goes in here. I don't know. This
Is there?
will go on top of Mario. And here.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it.
This is
There?
Okay.
All right, we're gonna take it. So let's talk for a second. Let me show you first the box. Can I show you the box? Okay, so here's the box of what they were making, if you can see this. Can you see this online? All right? Okay, so we got close.
That was great to me.
Yeah. We got close. All right. This, we didn't get that close, Michael. I'm a little disappointed. Look at what's happening over here. He's got like 17 pieces left of an 11-piece set. Okay.
I think it looks great.
She's it. So let me just tell you a couple of things. First of all, I'm fired. I totally tricked you because I cheated and opened the box. So because I cheated, you're both going to get a hat. And thank you. You can go sit down. Okay. Thank you. But if you look at our set, a couple of things happened that didn't make it really pan out for either one of you. And I would venture to just say, you had a bunch of pieces in there that you really weren't supposed to have in there, and I'm gonna lie, I actually bought a third set and I swapped some pieces out. So I thought I would kind of make it an idea of what I wanted it to be, not necessarily what the creators of Lego wanted it to be. You didn't look at your instructions until I opened it up for you, is that right?
I was following this.
Oh, you're following? Okay. The point being is that if we're going to actually create the Legos as the Lego company, and where are they? Denmark, is that right? I don't know, somewhere far away. If we're going to create what they've designed for, is Denmark? It is impossible for us to do that if we don't, first of all, know what that design is, and then follow the playbook of the creator. You know, we might get some version of it. We might get frustrated. But it will never be all that the designer could have hoped for us, or that he could have created for us to be. And so give them a big round of applause. Thank you, guys. You can leave the Legos there. And what I want you to take away from the example is that as you build intentional relationships and you lean into the mentor mindset with whoever it is that you're mentoring, remember this. They were designed by God on purpose and for a purpose. And as mentors, our call is to help them live into that, discover it, right? It's not about us becoming more. It's about them becoming more of who God designed them to be. Katrina?
Okay, so let's dig into building that relationship. And I'm going to give you all the word respect as an acronym and use each letter to describe, just offer just a little bit of what that process could look like. Today's reality is that young people more than ever need these vital relationships. They need people to draw near to them, to see who they are. They need a compass. With the extremely divided world we are existing in, it's crucial that they have guides to walk with them. We need guides. You know, we need our circle of people too to help us so that we can walk with them. And they need a place to run to when things are really confusing so they don't feel alone. They need a space to be where they are and to come as the person they currently are, with the struggles they have, with whatever's going on, without any expectation of perfection, right? They need a community of adults and peers to help them navigate towards Christ. And they need people to live and walk in this world with. So how do we foster these relationships? And as I said, I want to look to the word respect. I think the word respect is an interesting word. I think we overuse it. I think we often put our starting place as these young people need to respect the elders. They need to give us their respect. And I think something changes in that relationship when we see first that we need to respect them. The first time I heard the etymology of this word, just broken down, it blew my mind. So when you think about the word respect, right? To do again, spect, the word meaning look, see. So if I am to respect you, I will keep looking and break down my first impression, break down the thing I see that maybe pulls me away from you or allows me to define you, right? And I will look again. I heard a story about someone seeing a woman on Rodeo Drive, like walking out of a store with like bags, you know, just like full bag, you know, handbag, whatever, went all this shopping and whatever. And they looked and they were like, wow, look at her. This is how she's spending her day. It's the middle of the day and she gets to go out and go shopping. And then the same person looked back at her and she was walking into a children's place, like a place where people give donations to help families that are in need. And she walked in with all of those bags and left with none of them. And so this was an opportunity to stop and to look again. The reality is that if we begin with respect and honor, and we honor their humanity and their personhood, then this mutual trusting relationship will happen where we can be for them and learn from them, right? It is through this relationship that they will have the comfort, support, and courage to, God willing, become the person that God is designing them to be. So let's start with R. We talked about this a lot. This has been mentioned. Michelle mentioned it. Relationship, right, is so key, and it takes time, right? It takes time to form deep, trusting relationships. But the reality is if we come in, like just allowing ourselves and that person to take those steps, just the effects are beyond what we can imagine with just listening, being present. And we can only really serve those who we are deeply connected to. Right? We can only really serve those who we are deeply connected to. And we should enjoy building connections, right? And see it as an opportunity to look at a person and see who God is creating here. It's amazing. So when there's trust, guidance and support are welcomed, right? So the E, encouragement. And I would say encouragement, not behavior management. Right? I would put those against each other. We need to encourage, not manage behavior. We need to give guidance and lift up people. Tell them what you see in them. And, you know, instead of saying stop, no, don't, right, which shuts people down and dismisses them, show them that you see their potential, right, and be with them as they meet it. The best way to help someone really be their true self is to call out the strengths and gifts you see in them and give them opportunities to reach that potential. The S, I'm going to say, is self-awareness. Don't miss a ministry opportunity to introduce someone to themselves. Young people are in the process of becoming who they are, and we need to give them opportunities for real self-reflection and encounters with Christ. And as best as we can, make every activity that we plan full, even if they don't always notice it, right? Hanging out and eating together, it's not empty, right? It's time to be together. It's time to sit together, to learn, to chat, right? You know, playing a game together can be just as full as praying together if we let it be. So right now, I think this is an important thing to point out about what therapists are noticing, that identity crisis in young people has become very common throughout the pandemic, which is why I think it's very important for us to draw near to them so that we can actually get close enough to see what's really happening with whatever's going on. Because the reality is that everyone just wants to belong. And young people, when they're learning who they are, they're rubbing up against other people, they're finding out who they connect with, and when they're isolated, right, they just like seek foundation, right? It's the same reason why people join gangs, right? They need some security, and whatever identity they can grab onto, they'll grab onto it, right? So us being alongside them to, again, encourage and help them see who they are, help them find ways to do that, and give opportunities for self-awareness is so crucial. And when we're loving and listening and understanding, instead of silencing them, right? I think in our fear sometimes we can just, no, that's bad, wrong, it's not what church thinks, that can be like our kind of initial, just whatever, reflex response. Instead of just like, okay, Let's talk. Tell me more, right? The less shocked we are, the better an environment we're creating for real, honest, raw, just authenticity to come out there and a real encounter with Christ to happen. Because if our fear jumps in and we're just like silencing and dismissing whatever's happening, then the chances of them actually trusting us with what's really happening, right, is going to diminish. P, I'm going to say as peace. Relieve anxiety, loneliness, isolation, right, need for approval. We want to offer them peace whenever we can. You know, because as you mentioned with electronics, they aren't aware how much they're lacking personal interaction. They've been socialized with screens. Like, they just don't know, right? I find in the YES program, whenever we're going out, and at first, you know, putting down the phone is really difficult. But as soon as they feel that interaction with a stranger, with a friend, they forget. You know, they're just like immersed in, wow, I'm being seen, like I'm interacting, like this is true connection, right? Because unfortunately they have a sense of false connection all the time. And again, not their fault. That's why we can't blame them for, you know, having an appendage as like as a cell phone. Because it's really not their fault. You know, we want to give them opportunities to see true connection and offer that instead of telling them why what they're doing is the wrong thing to do, but offer opportunities to show them what real peace can look like. So, and I think as people that are seeking to mentor youth workers, we need to facilitate environments and friendships that give that hope, right, in a place of suffering and help relieve it. Because that suffering is real. And again, they're trying to define what's happening with them just on their own because they don't understand it, you know, because they're just kind of inundated with why do I feel like I don't have security? Why do I feel like I don't have foundation? When they see that they have security and foundation, right, they'll breathe a little better. They'll have some peace and be able to see what's really going on with them. The next E we'll say is expectations. Young people become what you expect from them. If you believe in them and expect great things, they will rise to those expectations. If you expect disrespect and selfishness, that's what you're going to get. Teenagers are not stereotypes. Young people are not in waiting to become something, right? I was just talking with a young person the other day how they just feel like they're always in transition. They're always like preparing for being secure, right? Having purpose, being able to offer something, right? So as soon as you hear someone say that, right, our reaction should be like, how do I make sure that you don't feel like you're always waiting to be productive, always waiting to offer, always waiting, oh, when I have this job, when I have this house, when I'm married, you know, all these future things that may never happen, we're depending on and putting a lot of stock on. And it's just so important that we give them meaning now, that we give them opportunities to feel, and we expect that of them. So we have to draw near to be aware of what's really going on and be fair and reasonable in evaluating their behavior. I really think 99% of behavior we don't understand in a young person and a person in general, in someone, you know, who's way beyond their years, is a sign of suffering. 99% of the behavior we don't understand is a sign of suffering. So we need to ask questions and don't assume. And the C and the T, I'll do those together, is to care, right? Take every opportunity you can to make sure they know that they matter to you. Notice what they care about and engage them in it, like you were saying. Tell them you like their clothes. Tell them you want to go to the concert of the band they like with them. When I was a youth director, my priest and I took like 5 girls to see NSYNC, and it was so weird. But like, it was the best thing ever, you know, for them. And I think just being with us and, you know, was the best thing about it. Often just being seen and heard is healing and life-giving, I would say. Just noticing. Instead of saying, why are you doing this? Like, notice, oh, I want to hear more about your music. I want to hear more about this. And then trust, and we've been talking about this, giving them real responsibilities. So I think it would be good, the more time we leave just for questions and thoughts, So this second set of journaling questions, you can do on your own. What do you think? What have you experienced in mentoring relationship that has worked well? What has been lacking in mentoring relationships you've been a part of? I think this is an important reflection so that as we move forward and seek to do the best we can to, okay. So we have more time than we thought. All right, great. Okay, so let's do this then. Let's do this journal time, the second set of journaling questions. Thinking about everything that we've discussed so far and thinking about your own personal relationship with mentoring. What have you experienced in mentoring that has worked well? And as we seek to kind of use a meaningful approach and an approach that can build these connections, what has been lacking in the mentoring relationships you've been a part of? So we'll take 3 minutes. Go for it. What have you experienced in mentoring relationships that has worked well? In either your own mentoring someone or being mentored. So what Christina said, I'll highlight. Some of the things she said is just having someone being there, like becoming a friend, someone who like it transitions from like, and is helping her to be who they are without their own agenda, someone who becomes a friend but is still there for advice. And do you want to say the last part in your own words on the microphone? I thought it was really, I would love for you to say it in your own words.
So the last thing I said was just someone who's not trying to be somebody for me or like play a specific role. I've realized I've never had a mentor who would have probably named themselves, I am Christina's mentor, you know, but someone who was just there that as I was figuring out who I was becoming.
Yes.
Yeah.
Amen. Anyone else? Do you have something like to share? I'd love for you to say your own words.
Sure. Someone who initiated the contact and then they just made themselves available to me. So I think one of the challenges can be as a mentee not wanting to like burden someone,
Yes.
especially because most of the time I think the people that I love to be mentored by are very busy.
Yes.
A lot going on. So someone who just makes themselves available, initiates the
Right.
contact, checks in, and remembers like important events too.
Yes.
That's great.
So someone who, can I repeat a little bit? Someone who initiates the contact and doesn't put the pressure on the mentee to reach out and begins that relationship. Someone who remembers things about you. That's so great. And it brings up something that actually just happened to me yesterday. I was talking to someone that I work with, not officially as a mentee. This is someone that's been involved in the ministries I'm part of. And she said to me, because she's becoming now a parish youth worker, and she said, because I said to her first, I said, do you want to start having like just more regular meeting times? And she's like, I'm glad you said that because I know how busy you are. And I was like, I'm not too busy. You know, like, so it's really important if you feel that someone is kind of like setting a meeting with you or like starting just to reach out because of whatever they're going through, to at least offer, like, not say, should we, or you don't say we should. What I said was, if you would like, let me know. If there comes a time when you want to meet more regularly, the door's open. And I made it, I opened the door for her to make the choice. And she did. So I think this is very important.
That's great.
Yeah.
I would just ask you for everyone
Who has something to say. If it's just 2 words, shout it out. You can repeat it easily. Otherwise, if it's a sentence, please come to the mic so that we can practice good relationship habits with even our body of
Friends
Christ
online.
that's online. Okay,
Okay.
so that they feel seen and heard as well. So
Perfect. Perfect. Great.
In trying to overcome struggles and the path to take forward, understanding that people have gone before. Suffering is not necessarily unique. Somebody else has gone through this and that shared experience. And on the positive side, success leaves clues. So whether I'm struggling or trying to look for a successful path, somebody else has done this before, they've overcome it or achieved it, and to just build that relationship with them.
Did you say success leaves clues?
Yeah,
Yes,
it's
I
not
did. I
like
could say it again.
brilliant, brilliant. I love that too. Yes. We're going to credit you. Success leaves clues. That's brilliant. Yeah.
Allow them to set goals for themselves, work alongside them to help them reach it.
I think we're finding this theme here, right? Like letting go of what we don't want to create people in our
Own image, right? I think someone said this before. I think Father said this about, we want them to be disciples of Christ and not our own disciples. Right? Yeah.
Accompaniment.
Accompaniment?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Right. Thank you. Yes. The second question, what has been lacking in mentoring relationships you've been a part of? Who would like to just call out what's been lacking? Empathy.
I think sometimes expectation for follow-through. So you can have the event where you've set expectations and you don't necessarily meet them, but there's really no encouragement to catch up.
Okay. Expectations for follow-through. I think it's important when it's interesting, like if a mentoring relationship is starting to have struggle or issue, that it's an opportunity to mentor, right? That we don't just say, we go, yes, we can get advice from outside, but someone from the outside shouldn't come into a mentee and say, why are you not responding to this person's calls? Or why are you not following through, right? But the mentor can get guidance and support from someone to figure out how to go to that person and say, why are you not following through? Does that make sense? Because I think that's happened before where if the outside person comes in, then we're missing an opportunity there to be challenged and to work through something that a mentor relationship is the place to work through. Yeah. Anyone else? What has been lacking in the mentoring relationships you've been a part of? Yes.
I think sometimes you need your mentors. If you have a mentor that's kind of been and done it so long that they don't remember.
Yes. Could you have the mic, please? And sorry, I
was saying near peer mentors.
Yes.
So if you have a mentor that, is so too advanced, they don't remember the struggle that you went through to learn. So if you have somebody that's just ahead of you, they can kind of remember that it's difficult to do whatever you're doing. So sometimes you might find a mentor, but they don't really remember what it was like to be in your position.
Right. Beautiful. Thank you. Yes.
So I don't know if I'm going to explain this well, but I think one of the things that can happen poorly is as mentors, we can kind of create a relationship that our mentees are relying on for support and then maybe not act responsibly when it comes to ending or transitioning those relationships. And so I think the either non-reconciliation when there's conflict or kind of non-responsibility for the absence of that relationship are both, important to flag.
Beautiful. So it's like being mindful when you're in the relationship to be so outside of yourself where that you can see like, okay, this is the way we need to, okay, it's time to transition. I think sometimes we can feel like very attached even to like feeling purposeful and needful in that way and not make that meaningful transition when it's time. Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else want to?
That's actually a
Great.
really
Yes.
helpful lead-in to just a few things to consider here. If we go back to our Alice and Felix story and the baton, if she had all the knowledge of what to do in the situation, and if she had the right mindset, and she was, clean on her motivations, but she didn't actually put them into action, then she may never have been able to assess and solve the problem that she faced. And I'd like to assert that it's the same with our mentoring relationship. So let's just take a few minutes to talk about what I consider one of the most essential pieces of a great mentoring relationship, which is the plan, right? So at Faith Tree, the only thing we really pound on every single resource we make is practical application. So let's talk about 4 ways that everything you just talked about, what you just said was actually a perfect lead in, about how we put our mentoring into action and bridge the gap. So the first thing I'd like to suggest is that you find the right person. Now that comes with some strings attached. Jesus handpicked who he mentored after prayer. They didn't pick him. And I bet all of us can relate. And if there's anyone who can't relate to this, raise your hand. But how many times do we get asked, can you grab coffee with me? Or can I pick your brain about something? Do we all know that all the time, right? And those engagements are important. They are important. But I'd like to suggest that there's value in really defining a mentoring relationship and picking who you're going to pour into in a meaningful way. Of course, going to God first in prayer and see who he leads you to. And then a secondary thing, as you think about finding the right person, is knowing what your expectations are, right? So if you look to the chair of the board here at St. Vladimir's, Deacon Michael Hyatt, he is a very intentional mentor, very intentional. And he actually has a group of men that he mentors, and he kind of does it by audition, like you have to apply. And he has some criteria that I think is worth sharing. So if you want to be a man in his mentoring group, number 1, you have to have a passionate commitment to Jesus Christ. You may be struggling in your relationship with Christ or with God, but fundamentally, you want to grow. For a variety of reasons, he asks that his mentors, mentees, all be men and in their late 20s to late 30s. He requires that you're a man who's willing to look at yourself in the mirror and make changes to improve. He requires that you're a teachable man who's willing to take direct feedback about anything without being defensive. He looks for men who are willing to replicate the process, again, going back to multiplication, at least once with another group of men in the future. And he requires that you be someone who lives in his proximity so that they can meet face to face. That's important to him. You can decide what's most important to you, right? Maybe you have people you engage with online. Maybe you don't care if you have someone who is the same gender as you or not. But putting some words around that process and really thinking through intentionally how you could best serve in a relationship is key. Okay, number 2. Number 1 is find the right person. Number 2 is strive to be the right person. And this is an ongoing pursuit for sure. But part of great mentoring is a mentor who is in pursuit of learning, drawing closer to Christ and his church, and who models deep selflessness. So when you think about Christ on the cross, I mean, he did it voluntarily. It was the ultimate act of selflessness to give his life to those and for those who were killing him. And although I want to be clear, if your mentee is trying to kill you, we probably need to have a different offline conversation. But as mentors, if we look to Christ as the perfect model, there will be a definite requirement for us to pursue deep selflessness, right? A willingness to invest time in others where there's obviously no clear return on investment all the time. Another part of being the right person, and we've touched on this, I've heard this from several of you, and certainly Katrina, is to set aside the actual temptation to share everything you know or to fix every problem, right? Or anything that might stem from ego. This is a hard one for me because sometimes I want to take it by the reins and say, seriously, you did that? Or you're going to do that? No, do it like this. But it's dangerous and it can quickly become, back to what we talked about earlier, all about me. And then the focus isn't on them, which is the intention of good mentorship, right? Really good mentors love to see their mentees go beyond themselves. So here's a fun fact. Have you all heard of Peter Drucker? Do you know Peter Drucker? He's one of the most influential thinkers on management ever. Well, he actually mentored Jim Collins. Do you know the author Jim Collins? He wrote Good to Great, which is kind of a business classic. And he always talked in interviews about how he was so thrilled with the success of Jim Collins. And so in a different interview, Collins talks about a time where he went to Drucker and said, how do I ever pay you back? And Drucker replied, you've already paid me back. I have learned so much from our conversations. The only thing that you can do is go give it to others. Go out and make yourself useful. Great mentors know who they are, and they are always pushing to grow and learn and give, and they get great joy in seeing any wisdom that they may have offered the world live on through the next person. Number 3, and Kira, I think this talks a little bit about what you just mentioned, is to put some expectations around a mentoring relationship. It really makes it so much easier if you know clearly how you're going to engage each other. Now, again, we're not talking about coffee or going out to grab a lunch or can I pick your brain? We're talking about an ongoing mentoring relationship. No relationship can grow to its fullest potential if you never actually relate to people, right? Trust cannot be built without first establishing some expectation and commitment. So as you think about your mentoring relationships, consider establishing whatever requirements might serve you, and they'll be different for all of us. So for example, maybe you agree when you will meet, how long you will meet, where you will meet. Will you have an agenda each time, or is it just a one-off conversation? Do you require them to be punctual? A lot of mentors, as we were kind of researching and studying, that's a big deal for a lot of mentors, because in this relationship, you're coming in and we're actually going to go through a process together. Some we have seen read a book together or go through other materials together and discuss. Will you engage in a group setting? Is it one-on-one every time? All of these things are important to flesh out. And one that I think is worth considering, and to your point, somebody said it, but I don't remember who, I'm sorry, is will you have a cutoff date? Are you going to have oh, it was you, that's right. Are you going to, go on ad infinitum? What's that term? Ad infinitum? Are you going to go all the way down until you're all, old in years? Or is there an actual season of life that you can best pour into your mentee? Thinking through all these formalities can really take the relationship from coffee to a whole nother level, where it becomes not only real relationship, but a mutual understanding of what the relationship is and how you will deliver on the agreed upon goals. And the last and fourth thing that I want to mention and leave you with is this. Don't underestimate the value of prayer around these relationships. It's critical. Jesus was a praying man, and he came before his Father regularly and with fervor. As mentors, consistently praying not only for our mentees, but for the relationship itself, keeps us focused not only on them, but what their needs are, right? It gives us insight into their hearts or where their struggles are, and it allows us to serve them well. What are they focused on? It's an active way of loving them, serving them, and stewarding them well.
Beautiful. So let's end with this. A strong 1.5-minute brainstorm of some tangible ideas in your workbooks. There's an ending activity there. And the question is this: what are your 3 best ideas for intentionally preparing to pass the torch to others? I think the more we write things down and say things out loud, the more likely we are to go forward with what we want and intend to do. So let's just do a strong 1.5-minute brainstorm and end with that. And then whoever wants to share their thoughts online, in the room, out loud, we'll do that. We'll end with some power in the room.
We discussed early on in our marriage the importance of these 3 different types of relationships, the importance of always teaching someone or mentoring someone, also the importance of always being mentored by someone or being taught by someone, and then friends or colleagues with whom you can wrestle ideas
Love
out
it.
with. So being very intentional about who are those groups of 3 sets of important relationships.
Amazing. Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else like to share? Anyone else at home want to share? Steve.
Maybe this is dumb, but like, what's the torch? Right? Is the torch a particular vision? Is the torch a particular project? Is the torch a particular whatever? Like I don't know. As I was thinking about this, I'm like, what is the actual torch that I'm talking about? Is it something abstract? Is it a particular thing? I don't know if that's dumb, but that's.
No,
what-
it's not
that's my-
dumb. It's not dumb. Did anything come to your mind when you were thinking about it? Or are we asking the question? Yeah, okay, okay.
You know, I'll share with you something that our parish priest says at my home parish in California. So when he really set up the youth program in Sunday school, one of the things that he kind of had as a core like driving force was that we don't just want to graduate young people, but we really want to start them on a path towards spiritual maturity. And it will look so different for everybody, but the pursuit of it was what was the most important. So if there was a torch, I would say probably it won't look the same for all of us. And it'll be kind of getting on the path and keep taking the next step down the path.
Yeah. I would say also like a few things come to my mind and they've been mentioned as far as like, if you are in a leadership position, I think there's never a time that's better than today to start succession planning and to start thinking about how are you intentionally preparing someone. I mean, this is crass, but my old boss used to say, like, what if I got hit by a bus tomorrow? Like, what would happen? You know, would the ministry be able to carry on immediately? And everything for the Yes program, my board chair has it. Like that happened, you know, as soon as we had a board, the board chair has everything for the Yes program. And I would say that every time we're doing ministry, if you're running a camp, if you're in a parish, that you're always thinking about preparing people intentionally by bringing them onto your team, giving them different things to do. And I would also say if we're going right to the mentoring torch, that when you think about the race and the next person taking the baton, it's their time. And so I think in that situation, it's doing what we've been talking about, like showing someone how to be who they are and calling out in them. So the torch, we all need people. Like truthfully, Michelle Moujaes is the person that got me in my first ministry job simply because we were working together and she told her brother to have me go work in this church. And like just her seeing that in me started my whole life in a way that I wouldn't have been able to do myself. So I would say that the torch is different for everybody, but I think it's the bringing out in whoever, in whatever situation you're in, their true self and allowing them to run.
And that, if I can piggyback on that for just a second, that requires, if you look at the baton pass, which I knew nothing about any sport ever, but certainly now I know a lot more about the baton pass. But there's a period where you're kind of running together, right?
Right.
It's not just everybody stops, you hand it, they go. There's an in sync running where you're kind of not necessarily on the baton pass, but let's say for our purposes, side by side, so that you can actually grab the baton well, right? And so I think that's a really important piece as we think about whatever the torch is we're handing off, and it will be different for everyone, but I think definitely having a process through which you can run side by side so that they can take it and have their time. That's a big piece.
A few comments and questions online. Brian Sulo says, I'm not sure about the mentoring part, but documentation is key to passing the torch. If you know something, don't make the people who come behind you guess.
Yes.
Deborah Thomas asked, how do parishes identify the candidates to whom the torch should be passed? I know our parish went through an exercise where we asked every functional ministry, we asked who is your successor and who is your second string? So not just the immediate first string bench, but who's on the second string so that we could see a bit of a runway. And I think having those people in those positions kind of helps that identification question. And then Ann Dankert mentions being intentional about engaging in conversation with younger people and not just peers is critical. Like
Amen.
Being intentional as you go to coffee hour, I'm going to talk to a young person.
Right. Yes, I think that's something we should all kind of write down on our, whether we write it on paper or in our minds, like doing the approaching and thinking about building that relationship for whatever God might bring from it. I would also say, as far as like the putting people in places to do work, I think often I've seen growing up, like, and this is beautiful. We had a great person. If you're watching, I love you. But the same youth director, I'm 43 years old, and the same youth director I had as a teenager was still the same person in the church, you know, just a few years ago doing the work, right? Something, you know, number one, they had the time and they were amazing, right? But I think when that person left, it was like, who was gonna, I think we should think when we're putting people in positions, not just because they're available, but put more intention around it. Like, who can do it now? Who has the time now? And we put them there instead of saying, what is the process of putting the Sunday school person in charge? What is the process of all the things that we do? And how are we always in the process of passing on? Always. Because then if the person needs to be in the job for 20 years, then they're also learning too, because they're documenting, I think it's good for everybody to be in that process.
I've heard of parishes, I love this model, I don't know if any of you have seen it before, but parishes where if you take, for example, church school, Sunday school, and they have the past church school director who is on board the team, you have the current church school director who's being mentored and it's being handed off kind of systematically, and then you have an incoming. And so let's say it's 2 years. So the current church school director would have 2 years with the support of a mentor from the past, right? And pouring into and letting the next upcoming kind of experience that. And so that it's constantly, there's a constant chain of handing off very intentionally.
Yeah.
So, and that may not be, I mean, that's one specific example. It may not work for every parish, but the idea that thought has been put around.
Yeah.
Right? So you don't have to start over every time.
Any other questions?
Sharing from my own experience, and the best piece of advice that I received, it was, if you are not a good disciple, if you are not a good disciple, you cannot be a good leader. And I think that's one of the great things that we all intentionally can have in our plans as mentors, as leaders, to share the experience that we had as disciples.
Amen.
And that is not something new, not something from the modern science. It's what the church has always taught us in the life of the saints. And of course, in the monastic life, and of course also in the family life, we learn from one another how to obey. That was the advice that I was given by my spiritual guide, so to say, or mentor when I was taught the monastic. Obedience to, it's the hardest thing to accomplish, but you learn that if you're not a good obedient son, you cannot be a good example as a father. So I think that's probably one of the things that practically we can share with others in our relationships with them, and mentoring and teaching.
Thank you. I think we need to talk more about being followers. We talk a lot about servant leadership, but following is such a servanthood as well. And even like for people that are leaders in one place, I think it really shows discipleship when you can show up in another place and be a follower and just like stand back and watch and let it happen if it's not your time, if it's not your thing. And yeah.
That's good. All right. You want to close it out? We're good? Oh, one more.
Oh.
I have one is whether the portrait bringing the new person into the story and telling them the story. If that's like sharing a vision, or even telling them like, these are the things we've tried and we haven't been able to successfully do yet, those kinds of things, because I know that in my ministry, I'm always thinking about the people who came before me, and I'm continuing to tell the story of our organization, but I'm also thinking about like, they told me what they saw in me while telling me the story. So I know my part is to carry on and give my gifts and not to repeat like who they were.
Amen. You done? Anything else? Good? Yes.
All right.
So I was so wrapped up in what everyone was saying. I forgot so I think God gave me a gift yesterday. I had a coworker of mine, a young gentleman that I work with, sent me his application to residency to edit. And there was this one part in it where he was talking about, the question was, describe an important mentor and relate how that person has been helpful to you. So I want to just share this with you. Your lamp was lit from another lamp is a line from a 13th century poet named Rumi. This quote is a pillar of my beliefs regarding the importance of mentorship, as it inspires one to let go of any sense of entitlement regarding one's gifts and reminds me that not only do we need each other, but it is our duty to light the flames in each other. The most important mentor in my life, they mention it, took me under her wing at the age of 15. Before meeting her, I saw leadership as decisive reactions and someone afraid to speak their mind. She was the first to show me the character of a true leader. Countless times I watched in awe as my mentor took the troublemaker in the room, often a disruptive teenager, and transformed his or her entire demeanor through love. Rather than seeing the troubled individual as one who was disobedient and in need of disciplinary action, she saw the individual as a human with unmet needs of love and acknowledgement. Through her actions, I learned how to truly listen for the needs of others rather than impose what I believe those needs are. My mentor showed me that true leadership is not achieved through coercion or intimidation, but manifests itself through empathy, encouragement, and selflessness. The example my mentor set for me has gifted me emotional intelligence and deep empathy for the human condition that I carry with me through all facets of life. Thank you all.
Thank you.